You can't beat the SP 500. Heard that before? Even Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger advised the average investor to dollar cost average in the S&P 500. But here's the catch. Berkshire Hathaway didn't get rich by buying the index. They got rich by investing in individual companies. Coca-Cola, American Express, Apple, and so on. And here's the truth nobody talks about. In the last 5 years, 3 out of 4 stocks within the S&P 500 actually underperformed the S&P 500 as a whole. So when you actually invest in the S&P 500, you're also investing in 75% of the losers as well. So do you want average, or do you want to learn how to pick the winners? Welcome to the channel, friends. I'm Adil. I'm a doctor. I'm a father of 2. I'm an investor. And once I lost £47,000 chasing hype, I rebuilt this entire amount and grew my portfolio to £70,000, far ahead of the S&P 500. So if you want to learn some of the lessons I've learned and apply it in your own investing journey, then stick around. Each week I send market updates and the exact stocks that I'm watching in my free newsletter. So sign up by clicking the link below. And going straight into the video, I'm going to show you something that you've probably never seen before. So this graph over here is the percentage of stocks within the S&P 500 that have actually outperformed the index itself. So you could see that majority of the years between the year 2000 and about 2020, we're talking at least 50% of the stocks within the S&P 500 outperforming the actual S&P 500. So what that meant is you could literally pick any stock within the S&P 500 and you have a 50-50 chance of getting it right in terms of outperforming the index. However, in recent years, that number has come down to close to about 27-28%. So what that means is now if you were to pick an individual stock to invest in within the S&P 500, you have a 25% chance that that stock will go on to outperform the S&P 500. On the flip side to that, you have a 75% chance that that stock will not outperform the S&P 500. But when investing, you don't just randomly throw a dart and see where it lands and invest accordingly like that. No, you do some checks. Everyone does some checks. And what I want to show you is by doing certain checks and filtering out some of those companies, the odds of you actually succeeding in the market is much greater than what you think it would be. So when it comes to actually becoming an investor, you face a dilemma. And that dilemma is, do you invest in an index, such as the S&P 500, or do you invest in individual stocks? And each have their advantages and disadvantages, but I'm going to show you why I personally stick with individual stocks as opposed to investing in an index. The first point I want to make is that an index, such as the S&P 500, has historically given us 7 to 10% returns per year. That's what it has given us. And I've shown you that 3 out of 4 stocks in the S&P 500 actually underperform the S&P 500. So although the top weighted stocks are doing really well, it's the other stocks that pull the performance of the S&P 500 down. Whereas with individual stocks, the potential to make more money is there. You can easily make more money there. However, at the same time, you can easily lose money as well. You can even make a loss in individual stocks if you pick the wrong ones and if you start chasing hype. The second thing with indices such as the S&P 500 is 75% of the stocks are losers. With individual stocks, you pick the stocks. So if you feel that a stock is going to be a loser, then you don't need to pick that stock. If you feel that a stock is going to be a winner, then of course you pick that stock. The next thing with indices is that you have no control in what you invest in. And what I mean by this is the S&P 500, it has 500 stocks within it. And there will be some stocks that you might not even want to be involved in, such as weapon companies, alcohol companies, tobacco, etc. These are all part of the S&P 500. And if you did not want to invest in it, there's no way of you filtering that out. Whereas with individual stocks, again, you pick what you invest in. And the final thing with indices is that you can retire in 40 to 50 years. You've probably seen a lot of those compound interest calculators where you input how much you can put in every single month, such as $100 a month, and how long it would take you to become a millionaire. And whilst all of that is true, it's a slow process. It's not something that happens very quickly, and it certainly is better than keeping the money in the bank. Whereas with individual stocks, because the potential of making more than 10% per stock is there, then you can actually make more money quicker and retire earlier. Excuse my handwriting. So maybe it might not take you 40 years, it might take you 30 years to actually reach retirement if you were to do things this way, if you do it correctly. And it might not sound much, but having an extra 10 years in your life where you are financially free and able to do things on your own terms is a very big difference. That time might be more time spent with family. That time might be more time spent traveling the world. Everyone has their own goals, and this time can be used towards that goal. So this is the dilemma that you face as an investor. Which one do you actually go for? And the truth is, there's no right or wrong answer to this. It depends on your personal goals and where you want to be. I personally picked the individual route because I want to get places quicker, but that doesn't mean someone investing in the S&P 500 is doing the wrong thing. No, that's not the case. So I want you to think about which route you want to go down and why. And if you want to go down the route of individual stocks, then be sure to subscribe to my weekly newsletter where I show exactly what stocks I'm watching, and it's free of charge. Okay, so I hope I've convinced you that investing in individual stocks may not be as hard as it seems as it is. And I refer back to this chart where you could pick 4 stocks in the S&P 500 and 3 of them will go on to underperform the S&P 500 and 1 of them will outperform the S&P 500. So the question becomes is how do you get to that one stock that actually outperforms the S&P 500? And this is a whole talk in itself, and I am going to share with you ways that I filter that down. However, I'm going to go through 2 things in this video, so stick around. The first thing is debt. So when investing in a company, debt kills businesses. Yes, debt is sometimes needed to actually grow the business, but if the debt in a company is high, then it's very vulnerable to market changes. So for example, if we were to slip into a recession, or if something major was to happen to that specific sector, then this company will still need to be paying the debt off. It still needs to be paying interest. And because they are paying so much in interest, they don't have much money left over to actually work on the business itself. So that's why it's very important to pick a company with a low debt. And this isn't just me saying it. There's actually studies that have been done. So for example, we've got this over here where you've got the cumulative return for the Russell, so 1,000 US growth companies, and you can compare the performance of the low debt companies versus the high debt companies. And it's summarized in this table over here, where generally speaking, the low debt companies have outperformed the high debt companies. It's also further shown in this research over here, done by Bloomberg, where you could see that the low debt companies have generally outperformed the high debt companies, which are here in red. So that's the first thing I wanted to mention. And how do you filter for companies with a low debt? On websites such as Finviz, which is linked in the description below, you could search for the company that you're looking at, and there'll be a figure that says debt to equity ratio. And what you're looking for is a debt to equity ratio of less than 1. So that's a good start to be making. And the second thing, if you've watched my last video, is the actual sales that the company makes. Seeing rising sales over time is a very important factor when actually looking at the company, because it indicates that the company is growing over time. So if you look at this chart over here, you can see that since 2016, the growth has been increasing every single year. This company over here is United Health. It's not a company I personally invest in, and it's a company that I don't plan to invest in, but I'm just putting this figure over here so that you can have a look at it. So something like this is really reassuring to see. But then on the flip side to that, if you look at something like this where sales, it was going up, but then since 2021, it started going down. This company is Intel. And you could see this is something that you really want to avoid, because if you look at the price action on Intel, it's actually in a downtrend. So these are just 2 of the factors to be looking at when actually filtering a company down to try and get the right stock that will actually outperform the S&P 500. There's much more to go into, but before you go into that, I recommend you first watch the full video of where I talk about sales and a company by clicking over here.